Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavadijamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om peace, peace, peace. Oh, good evening. We are continuing reading from selections of Swami Ramakrishna. How's that? Better? Want me to get closer or further? All right. So this one's called The Message of Sri Ramakrishna. I was thinking of doing something on Buddha, but we have 3 lectures on Buddha this month, plus the special program on the 23rd. That's, what is that, a week from next Thursday, I think? So I figured, well, let's just continue with his selections on Sri Ramakrishna, along with most of the direct disciples, but especially Swami Brahmananda and Swami Ramakrishna. You could think of as specialists in this department. So let's start the message of Sri Ramakrishna.
The message of Sri Ramakrishna may be summed up in a very few words. He says that all religions are but different paths leading to the same goal. It requires no little effort on the part of men to understand this. Although it is the simplest of all assertions, still it is the boldest, for no religionist will admit its truth. Religion as it is practiced is altogether different from religion as it should be practiced. There is no religionist nowadays who does not hold that the religion he believes in and practices is the religion, and that all other religions are irreligious. This is the case not only with Hinduism, each sect of which wants to prove that it alone stands for truth, and that the other sects only preach nonsense, but also with Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Jainism, and other religions. When such is the case with all the religions of the world, to say that these are but different paths leading to the same goal, God may appear on the face of it absurd. Yet this is the message which Ramakrishna has brought to the world.
Does it still seem a little loud? It seems a little loud. I don't know. How's it out there? A little loud? Okay. I don't know. You might try turning it down. Yeah, interesting. We could take this word nonsense in a different way. And in that case, you could say that certainly religions most religions are teaching nonsense. They want you to transcend your senses. They don't want you to be stuck in your senses. And so it's not nonsense in the idea of not making any sense, but it's nonsense in the sense that you're supposed to transcend your senses. And in another way of looking at it, we have to think that our sense organs are not all that reliable. So they're almost like nonsense organs because they don't really tell us the truth. If we had sense organs that actually told us the right thing, then we wouldn't need to practice yoga and to try to realize God. We'd see God all the time. So that would be nice. I'd like to have a sense like that. All right, let's continue.
This morning, my aim will be to prove rationally that even such is the fact. In order to do so, I shall take each religion, analyze it, and point out to you that every one of them leads to the same goal. Now let me begin with our own, the mother of all religions, Hinduism. The Hindus are divided into very many sects. There are many systems of religion here. For instance, there are over 25 commentaries on the Vedanta Sutras, and each commentary has its own following. The principal systems are those of Sri Madhvacharya, Sri Ramanuja, and Sri Shankaracharya. Now, I can point out to you that these philosophies, although they differ considerably in their method of expounding the universe, are still one and the same in their practical method. They point in the same direction and towards the same goal.
That's interesting. I did not know there were 25 different commentaries. Of course, we all have heard the main three. I remember a quote from Swami Vivekananda, who said that each school likes to torture the Vedic text to make it look like only their point of view is supported by it. And he, of course, thought that was silly. He said they're all supported by the Vedas. You can't just say that one of those three main schools, or maybe he was talking about all 25, who knows. All of them can be supported by the Vedas, and it's because it's describing something, as I said in the first paragraph, that are transcending our senses, and we're trying to put it in words that we relate to our experiences, which are through the senses. So all descriptions are bound to be approximations, and so different people can approximate things differently. And that's why you end up with these different commentaries. All right, let's go on.
Let me take up the system of Sri Madhvacharya. According to this great philosopher, three things matter: matter, soul, and God. They're eternal, self-existent, and uncreated. The souls have been placed between matter on the one hand and God on the other. The souls are good, bad, or mixed, and being infinitesimally small, they're very weak. Now religion begins with these souls. With matter on the one hand and God on the other, where are these souls to go? Their natural inclination is to go towards matter. Quote, God has created the souls in such a manner that they have always got an outgoing tendency, for he has placed all their senses outside. Katha Upanishad. They see that happiness alone can make them perfectly satisfied, and that their highest goal is the realization of eternal happiness. But they seek happiness only through the senses, and the senses readily please man. Now, however much a person may crave for eternal life, if he identifies himself with the senses and through them with the body, he's bound to feel misery when the body is miserable, and die when the body dies. Though it is a fact that the soul is eternal by its very nature, yet it forgets this on account of its foolish identification with the body.
You know, it kind of depends on where you're going to start the discussion. If you think about the sort of the idea of creation, which is sometimes a little awkward when you're talking in terms of Advaita Vedanta, but and out of it comes these various things. And so you could say that the Madhvacharya is simply starting after all of this has happened, and you've now got these three things. And now you're stuck dealing with these three things, and you've got to figure out a way out. And again, each of these, what we're going to see is each of these systems gives us a way of working through this difficulty of how we tend to see ourselves as separate from God, and work through this problem of always being attracted outwardly by the senses. All right, so let's continue with Madhvacharya and see what he says.
In the verse,
Let us take up the system.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Sorry. All right. Oh,
In a particular verse,
yeah.
the soul has been described as everlasting, immovable, motionless, eternal, and existing everywhere. This is the monistic definition. But according to Madhvacharya's system, the soul is anu, or infinitesimally small. These souls are many, and they find place in the all-pervading soul of God and cannot be counted. Being so very small, their powers also are necessarily limited and insignificant. They have some strength, but more weakness. Therefore, they have no power to know their own eternal nature. For this reason, there should always be one infallible being by the side of such helpless and weak souls to guide them properly. This infallible soul goes by the name of Guru, or spiritual preceptor. The duty of every individual is to be directed by such gurus. Sri Madhvacharya says, I am that guru.
And of course, if you were thinking in terms of Advaita Vedanta, you would say this is simply the way it appears. It's not actually, you're not actually small and weak, but it simply appears that way. So Advaita Vedanta really doesn't argue here with dualistic Vedanta. It recognizes that this really is the way it seems to appear to us. And this is then gives you a path of getting through it. So this is what Madhvacharya is going to present to us, this path.
The natural propensities of every individual are towards matter. By a process of correct discrimination, the tendency of the soul may be directed towards that which is not matter, spirit. Man is attracted by the charm of matter. It is out of matter that his body and all things that are attractive and charming have been brought into existence. Also the bodies of parents, wife, children, friends, and countrymen. They've all come out of matter. Out of matter has come into existence. All beautiful scenery, all savory dishes, they're produced out of it. Now it is difficult to give up one's own wife, children, and friends, and one's love for these. It is difficult to give up matter. Every formal entity is material, hence material worship is natural to man.
Yes, and of course, what you have to remember is that all these great and beautiful things that we see in nature are coming from one divine source. And so what we're going to want to do is turn our attention towards the Creator. I think Vivekananda pointed that out once to some of his Western travelers that were admiring the beauty of nature, and he just said, just think how more beautiful the maker of all these beautiful things is than the things that have been made themselves. All right, let's see exactly how he puts it here.
But this worship of my body and all other bodies will never give me that which I desire most. Why do I serve a certain man? Because by serving him, I expect to get something that I want. Now, every service is prompted by some such private gain. We want to live, and we hate death. Even the most healthy and sensible man will certainly become the victim of old age one day, however careful he might be in preserving his health. These are plain facts, and yet they are not perceived. Yudhishthira said, "What is most wonderful in this universe is that every day thousands and thousands die, and still people seem to think that they are an exception to that rule."
That was actually his answer to a question that he had to answer in order to not die at the edge of a lake. He and his brothers were all thirsty, and so they went to get water from this lake, and one by one this entity asked them the question, what is the most wonderful thing in the universe, or most unbelievable thing in the universe? I can't exactly remember how they phrased the question, but all the other brothers failed to answer it correctly, but Yudhishthira wisely answered that it was that even though people see other people dying all around them, they don't think they're going to die. That was the answer, and so he was allowed to drink and take the water, and all his brothers revived. So a happy ending to that story. All right, let's go on.
Thus you see that whatever might be our natural propensities, we are led to an entirely different way of valuing things when we analyze our environment. We find that this so-called life, this combination of body and soul, is not so desirable a thing. I am naturally deathless. Love of matter does not enable me to love God. In my true nature, I am only a dweller in this body. The body and myself are not one and the same. It is because I forget this fact that I identify myself with the body and bring myself down to the most material condition and regard myself as a being 3.5 cubits in length, full of weakness, physical and mental.
It's really not all that surprising that we identify with the body and the mind. Just think how people identify with other material things that they might inhabit. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're inhabiting a body. But people identify with the fancy car that they've just bought, or the beautiful home that they just happen to live in. And they're very proud of their car or their home. And so they're very much identified with it. They think that, especially cars, if you're driving this fancy car, somehow it makes you very special. So the fact that we've identified with the body and the mind, which we seem to inhabit much more permanently than other things like cars and houses, is really not so surprising. But this is the problem that we face in yoga, is to counteract that tendency of identifying with the body and the mind and not realizing that it's simply a temporary house for the soul. All right.
Such analysis can direct the mind of man towards his own real nature and towards him who is his real friend through eternity. Madhvacharya says that though the universe is made up of 3 factors, matter, souls, and God, still these are independent existences. Our goal is God, real happiness and real wisdom. He alone can give. In order to go to him, we must go away from the world. We belong to God, not to matter, since we are spirit. How are we to go to God? This world, this universe, is infinite in every way. Its age is eternal, and its extent is infinite. Even the swiftest locomotive engine can never take me out of space. But in order to go to God, I must go out of the world, because God is extracosmic. How? Now here all Aryan philosophers agree. Sri Madhva says, I am distinct from the world, so I can separate myself from it by closing the gateway of my senses. Thus, I can go towards God. Now let me analyze a portion of the world to find out its nature. For it is like understanding the nature of the ocean by analyzing a few drops of the water. Now take, for instance, the chair here before me. It has form, hardness, and so forth. And form, touch, and taste exist so long as there are eyes, skin, and tongue by which we perceive them. In this way, if the world is full of phenomena, no phenomenon can exist without the corresponding sense of perception. I too must be one of the factors by which all these have come into existence. If I can separate myself in any way from these, then the world of phenomena will vanish.
So again, this gets right back to the heart of the problem. If we, again, take the more Advaitic point of view that everything has come out of oneness, the first mistake that happens is that there's a split into subject and object. From oneness comes the subject and the object. They both come from the oneness. And then from that, there's a unity of subject and a plurality of objects, and you identify with the subject and you think everything else is an object. And so this is the difficulty that we're stuck in, that we've become attached to our sense perceptions, and we think that that is the world, and that's because we have separated ourselves into a subject that perceives all these objects. Now, again, from the cosmic perspective, if you take the idea of an eternal universe, I don't agree with the Big Bang model. You may have remembered that I've mentioned this several times. And this is one reason why, is that the scriptures have us in an eternal universe. It's an eternally perceived universe. So Brahman always exists, and so the universe in some form or other will always exist, and it can go back into seed form piecemeal. That was, Swami Vivekananda said that was his favored view. There were two views that one could argue from the Vedas. One that it was piecemeal, going back and forth into seed form and out into manifestation, and another where it's piecemeal or all at once. Anyway, notice how they always, the scientists, even though they're getting all this evidence that doesn't fit into their Big Bang model, they still talk about it in terms of the Big Bang model, trying to figure out what happened 13.7 billion years ago. If they can't get that model out of their head, they're not going to solve their problem. They're stuck in a model that doesn't work, and they just keep trying to tinker with it. Sort of like wallowing around in our sense perceptions and trying to figure out how to get out. You have to realize you have to transcend your sense perceptions in order to get out of this mess. It's like Alice in Alice in Wonderland. She was terrified in Alice in Wonderland that the queen was going to chop her head off. All she had to do was wake up. She didn't have to do anything else, just wake up. So this is the difficulties that we have. And so in this particular system, when you start with the manifest universe, which is what Madhvacharya does, then you're seeing it from that perspective, and then you have to try to figure out a way to get out of it. All right.
But Madhvacharya also believes in the instructible nature of phenomena when he localizes them in the eternal and infinite mind of God. Coming down, however, to the individual mind, limited by space and time, he admits their destructible nature. The matter behind all of these may be eternal, but phenomena in itself is not eternal, for it can be split up into two factors. The moment you get rid of phenomena, you get rid of the universe. How? Now sit down in a convenient posture, relax your limbs, shut your eyes, and sit steadily. Thus you can get away from the external world. This is very easy. But there is another world, the mental world, which is the shadow of this world and the recorder of all the past and the future. For the past world and the future world are all in the mind. It is not so difficult to get rid of even the present world. How then to get rid of the past and the future world? Yet you have to go beyond all this in order to reach God. So Madhvacharya says that you must bring your mind under your control. Even the mind cannot reach him. God is infinite. For man who regards himself as possessing a form, it is difficult to love God, who is formless. But when he remains absorbed in the thought world, he totally forgets name and form. Only when man gets away from the world does he come in contact with spirit. It is naturally difficult for him to give up the world and all its enchantments. It appears to him as something next to impossible. But it is an illusion. So Bhagavan Madhvacharya has asked all his disciples to search after God beyond the world, beyond one's own mind, but not beyond the skies, for you can never go beyond the skies.
That's kind of interesting that he says when you're absorbed in the thought world, you forget name and form. It seems to me you can have all sorts of names and forms in the thought world. So he's thinking of a thought world that is not exactly typical, I would say. I would think a lot of people daydream with all sorts of names and forms and thoughts of names and forms. But he's already assuming that you're able to control your mind and actually still the thoughts of the mind. So that's, I thought that was a little peculiar the way you put that. All right, let's go on.
Now let us come to Sri Ramanuja. Now he also holds the same view. But according to him, matter, souls, and God are inseparably connected. Whereas according to the dualist system of Sri Madhva, they are separate. And as such, the soul can completely separate itself from the other two. This is the difference. All the innumerable souls make up the mind of God. God is the central point. He is intracosmic and not, as in Madhva's system, extracosmic. He is Antaryaman, the indweller. He is in cosmos. He is behind every atom, also in the atom. In spite of this difference, the practical philosophy here is the same. For whether God is extracosmic or intracosmic, he is not the cosmos. So if you are to go to God and get what you really want, you have to go away from the world. You can cut off your connection with the world, for you come in contact with it only through your senses, through the organs of knowledge and through the organs of action. If you want life and wisdom, God alone and nothing else in the universe can give you these. He is the proprietor, and you are the property. Since all that you want can be had from God, seek God. Thus you see that though these philosophies differ in theory, they are one and the same in practice. They say, go back to your mind. Nay, even go beyond your mind.
Yes, that's, see, he hit the point there. You have to go beyond your mind or clear your mind of all thoughts of the world and of previous sense impressions and so forth. or imagined sense perceptions. But as hinted in Madhvacharya's viewpoint, if you can picture a divine form or some symbol of the infinite, some avatar or some god or goddess, then you can, it's interesting he didn't mention that, but this is, of course, one of the primary things that we do in our meditation is to try to still the waves of the mind going hither and thither in all different directions by putting it on one thing, which is normally the name and form of a particular deity or avatar. Or it can also be a spiritual teacher or guru. We usually do it as a lineage of gurus. You start with your guru and work your way back to Sri Ramakrishna, who embodies all the different gods and goddesses. And so you can think of it that way. So by replacing your many, many thoughts by one particular thought, you are essentially stilling the waves of the mind and become absorbed in that one thought so that you can transcend the ordinary sense impressions of the world. And it doesn't really matter how you thought of the nature of the world to begin with. This practice works for any of these systems. And so that's why Sri Ramakrishna said that it doesn't matter which of these systems that you take, they'll all work you back to the goal. All right, let's continue. Oh my, he's already going to be on to Shankaracharya. That was a quick summary of Ramanuja. Ramanuja, of course, is kind of the compromise position, you could say. Sometimes a little bit easier to grasp. Shankara's idea of an unreal world is very difficult to grasp completely. So Ramanuja is kind of that halfway point. So now he's going to go all the way on to Shankaracharya's Advaita system.
Let us now come to Sri Shankaracharya. Now, his philosophy is, of course, different from the other two philosophies. According to him, the world of phenomena, or the universe, is something which cannot be defined exactly, since it's constantly changing. Or it has some sort of reality which cannot be called existent or non-existent. For if it has any real existence, it can never become non-existent, as in that case something will have to be nothing, which is absurd. But as a matter of fact, every moment it is dying and giving birth to a new state of affairs, so it cannot be called existent or non-existent, nor can it be both simultaneously. For how can a thing be permanent and impermanent at the same time? Shankara uses the term Maya to indicate that such is the nature of the universe. So much regarding the known, coming back to the knower, the self, indicated by the first personal pronoun. If I put such a question as, who am I? The answer at once comes that I am a man of many wants. This is because I wrongly identify myself with the ever-changing body. Shankara has proved in several ways the perfect nature of the soul analytically. I'm not my body. It is mine. I'm not identical with it. This individual is made up of three factors: the body, the mind, and the self, or ego, behind the other two. The first two are changeable. The third is changeless. For there has been no break in the self-identity from boyhood to the present time. Now, change means death of one and birth of another, exit of one and entrance of another, end of one and beginning of another. Hence, changeless means beginningless and endless, or in other words, eternal. So the I behind body and mind is eternal. Shankara shows again that which is eternal must also be infinite, and he thus proves the infinite and eternal nature of the soul. He also proves the unity of the soul. There cannot be two infinities. Myself means the real self behind the body and the mind. This is true with regard to every other creature. Behind the body and behind the mind of every one of the self is one. This is Advaita, or the monistic system. Beloved, when there was no creation, there was only the soul existing, one alone, without a second. These individual souls are the shadows of that one eternal soul. The self is not outside me, it is inside. That which words cannot describe, where the mind cannot reach, that is the all-blessed self.
Well, he puts it exactly right. You know, the sloppy way we often talk about Advaita is that the world is unreal and Brahman alone is real. But he puts it quite correctly that Maya can't be said to be real or unreal, existent or non-existent. And that's because it's a temporary manifestation of something. So it's coming from the real, but its particular manifestation doesn't stick around, so it's, in that sense, it's not real in the sense that it's not permanent. So it's kind of like your dream world. You know, it's when you're in your dream world, it seems very real, and then when you wake up, it seems very unreal. But you still had a dream. The fact that you had a dream is still a real thing. That happened. You had a dream. And so this world of Maya is very much like the dream world. And when we wake up, we will realize that this world had a reality while we were in it, but it doesn't have a reality once you've transcended it. However, of course, as Sri Ramakrishna also pointed out, there is that highest state of Vijnani where you realize that God is in everything, and even though you're still seeing this world of Maya, you realize that everything in this world of Maya is the play of Brahman. It is the reality, and it's just having this temporary show of things. So that's another interesting point. And you know, Shankara is not adverse to worshiping deities either. He has many beautiful hymns and prayers to several of the deities and so forth. So again, his philosophy starts with this idea of oneness and emphasizes this idea of Maya as deluding us from the true nature of reality. But that doesn't mean that you have no use for avatars or deities. They're still useful to the spiritual practice. And as he points out, it's this reality that's behind everything it's infinite and it's undivided and it's unchanging. And that's the nature of reality. And it's a long way from nothing. Now he's going to go into Buddhism so we can see how he handles Buddhist claims, because they don't tend to emphasize this idea that the universe is coming from someplace, because they're just taking the very practical approach of trying to get out of suffering. So it'll be interesting to see how he summarizes Buddhism. All right, let's continue here.
It may be noted here that the individual soul has been regarded by other philosophies as smaller than the smallest, whereas Shankara has proved it to be bigger than the biggest. Two extremes meet. Now it is a fact, whatever is smaller than the smallest is the same as bigger than the biggest. Such is the teaching of the Upanishads. If we dive a little deep, we find no difference. Sri Madhvacharya and Sri Ramanuja can be understood by all. Shankara can be understood only by very thoughtful people. They all take us to the same goal, the same perfection, through the same processes. They do not differ in practical life.
And, I always like to look at Shankara's viewpoint from the standpoint of science. And science, if you look at science and the nature of reality that science pictures for us now, it seems like a very unreal kind of world. Again, we see things that look solid, and we know that it's made out of atoms that have combined into molecules, and that most of it's empty space. And then if you look even deeper, you realize that the electrons and the protons don't have well-defined characteristics. You have to measure them, and you can only measure certain properties at a particular time. So the more you know about where the electron is, for example, the less you know about what it's doing. And so that's a pretty fuzzy reality. It's not a very real reality when you look at it that way. And yet it creates this illusion of a reality. And it's a perceived reality. Notice that our physics now tells us that we have to perceive the electron, we have to measure the electron, we have to measure the proton, we have to measure the atoms, and then we can say something about it. But we can't say precisely all of the things we'd like to know about them. And that's because it's just the world of Maya. It's like your dream world. In a dream, it kind of, sort of makes sense, but then when you try to figure it out and you try to tell it to somebody, you realize there are a lot of things that didn't make any sense in your dream at all. That suddenly you found yourself doing this, and then suddenly you were doing that, and somebody suddenly shows up, and all these strange things happen. And so this world of reality is kind of like that if you get down to the nitty-gritty of the physics of it, that it's really not a very real world in that sense, and yet it creates this wonderful illusion. Of course, we also know that we can create wonderful illusions through movies and through holograms and now through virtual realities. You can almost imagine someone being born with a virtual reality set on their head, and they just grow up thinking that whatever they're seeing in this is reality. And then somebody finally takes the glasses off their eyes and they realize, no, this isn't the real world at all. So it's kind of like that. We're conditioned to see this world a particular way, and it's really not exactly like that. And yet the reality is that it all comes from Brahman. There isn't anything else for it to come from. All right, let's continue.
This is probably a good place to stop. He's going into another religion.
Oh, going to another religion. Oh, we're moving from India to Palestine. So we're going into the so-called Western religions. But what happened to Buddhism? He's going to leave. Where is he going to be Buddhism? Oh, he just keeps Buddhism way over a few pages later. So interesting that he didn't do that with Hinduism, because when he gets to it, he's going to tell us that Buddha was a rebel child, and he always remained a Hindu. So it's interesting that he didn't include that here. But there are so many different religions in the world, and as he said in the beginning, most of them take the viewpoint that their way is the only way, or that they're the ultimate update of the religion. So you have Judaism, and then Christianity is an update from Judaism, and that's the ultimate statement. And then Muhammad comes, and now he's going to be the last prophet, so you don't need to listen to anybody else with any more updates. It's like your computer. Some of us would just as soon they didn't keep updating things so we could actually remember how to use our programs. But anyway, the prophets keep updating religions, but they all claim to be the ultimate update. And so that's the nature of these religions. And then you even get other religions like the Latter-day Saints and so forth. And it doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means that because they have to engage in a sales pitch, you could say. And in order to have a sales pitch, you have to present yourself as the ultimate something, just like the ultimate in dishwasher soap or deodorant or something. Nothing else surpasses this. From Ramakrishna's perspective, he realizes these are all, all those soaps will get your things clean eventually. And similarly, all these religions can make your soul clean, you could say. And so each one has its own path, and they're all perfectly good paths. And you have to put yourself in a frame of mind that they're starting from. So if you're going to be a dualist, then you put yourself in that particular frame of mind that Madhva sets out, which is kind of starting a few steps away from the oneness, you could say. It's after the oneness is split into the duality, and the duality is split into the subject and the many. Then you're starting from there. Sankhya is a little bit like that as well. Sankhya starts with a dualistic perspective of things. And again, that's perfectly fine from a standpoint of understanding. Again, just as in sciences, when we're trying to understand sciences, it's almost impossible. In order to understand the way things are working in the world, if every time you were trying to figure out chemical reactions or physical interactions, you had to go back to the quantum level, that would be extremely time-consuming and most of the time, frankly, not very useful. So we have shortcuts, starting with things that are a little bit more tangible. And those systems work perfectly well in describing chemical reactions and physical interactions. So similarly, we can start with any of these different religious systems, and they're perfectly good in their own right, starting from those particular perspectives. And so each one takes a particular set of hypotheses and creates its own religious framework. Kind of like different kinds of geometries. We used to think that Euclid was the only geometry, and then they came up with non-Euclidean geometries and spherical geometry and hyperbolic geometry, projective geometry, solid geometry. So you got all sorts of geometries. And so they're all perfectly good in their own situation, and you can do things with each one of those geometries in that system. You just have to accept the rules of that system, and then you can go on from there. So similarly, we can accept the rules of any of these particular religions and follow our particular religious path according to them and reach the goal. All right, so let's close with a chant. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.